What's up guys, this is Kevin with Coast 77 is called Capture One Pro. I've used a lot of different editors for raw editing. Man, I love this program. It's amazing. You can do so much with it that you don't have to jump into Photoshop for. And really the reason for that is raw files are pure digital files. So any edits you do to that are sort of stored along the way and don't alter the original raw file. Once you open it in Photoshop and you start making edits to it, that's now pixels, and any edits you do to that are now permanent in that file. You have to save it, and each layer you add, the file size can get ginormous. With pure raw editing, it's really just sort of the data of what you changed and isn't really significantly adding to the size of the file almost at all. So it's really nice for that reason, because we all love our hard drive space. So all right, we're gonna jump on and get started here. The first thing we're gonna do is open up Capture One Pro. All right, the first thing we're gonna do here is create a brand new session. Really, it's just sort of naming the session. I'm gonna call this one Michelle Airbrush, for lack of a better term. That's going to go in the place where I store all my sessions, and really that's about it. Just to get started with importing a new session, that's about it. You hit OK. Go ahead and import those. And there we go. All right, so here's the file we're going to be working with, as you can see. You know, so far it's a great shot. I really liked this shot. This is the untouched, unretouched. I haven't made any edits to this. This is just straight out of the camera. I really was happy with this. However, there was a couple of things I wanted to do to it. So we're going to get started here in Capture One. Capture One lets you do some really quick and easy, just basic exposure. So what we're going to do, exposure, contrast, that kind of stuff. What we're going to do here to start off with, let's see if I can recreate this. So basically this is the unretouched. When we're done, this is the final retouched version of that. So you can see quite a difference here. So unretouched, that's retouched. You can see her freckles really popped, her eyes really popped. This photo was a little too yellow for my taste. I don't love yellow as a color in general, so I wanted to not have the entire photo look yellowy. Really the only things I wanted to have yellow, maintain some yellow, is her hair and obviously her sweater. But I wanted to kind of balance it out, because this overall has almost a yellow cast on it. I probably messed up my white balance or something like that, but we can easily correct that. So the first thing I like to do is just take a look at the white balance and just kind of really just visually slide it around, make sure, yeah, as you can see, like this will be way too yellow, this will be a little too blue. So somewhere in there in the middle is where we want to be. Just cool it off just a little bit. Also, sort of a standard thing on most photos I do is kind of punch up the contrast immediately. So as you can see already, this photo is just really starting to pop. Capture One Pro has this really great feature for if you're working with raw files, you can recover quite a bit of dynamic range. What I mean by dynamic range is the whites, anything that's in the white range, and anything in these shadows, these super dark shadows. So what we're going to do is, I'll show you what happens there. So anything that looks like it might be lost in your original photos, you can actually recover. See, as I pull that in, I'm getting more of her hair and a little bit of the background. So I'll recover that a little bit because I want to have some of that hair detail. And then also some of these shadows, you see as I do that, it really kind of lifts the shadow threshold. So somewhere in there is sort of nice. I don't want to lift it too much and wash out the photo, but I want to just recover some of that detail in there. And then as I do that, I always kind of come back and revisit the contrast. One thing to keep in mind on contrast is as you add more contrast, the photo adds saturation naturally. It's just sort of one of the things that photo editors do. So watch, you can see as I add a ton of contrast, you see that saturation? See how like bright and saturated this is getting? Obviously this is way too far, but just proving the point. So as you add contrast, sometimes you want to keep an eye on possibly lowering your saturation a bit to offset it. We'll bring this back to a sane level. All right, so as you can see already, this is looking much, much better. Here's where we started, and here's where we just got to. So that's already way better. All right, so we're gonna do a couple little touch-up things here. To get started, we're gonna go in her eyes. Obviously, it's one of the first things I'd like to correct. So what we're gonna do is just jump on in here, hide my thumbnails. And I was very happy that this 85mm lens, man, is one of the sharpest things I've ever seen. As you can see, it is super sharp. We're gonna enhance her eyes just a little bit. And I've mentioned this in previous videos. I don't like to go too crazy on doing this kind of stuff because it can look quite fake, and I like things to look a little more natural. Capture One has this feature called local adjustments. What you can do is you can create these layers that you can do adjustments to, and then at any time you can turn them off or come back and edit them. In Photoshop, if you do something like that, you can do it on a layer if you duplicate the entire thing, and there's a lot of things you can do with like overlay layers and adjustment layers. But I love this because these are just completely independent of the file. They manipulate the look of it, but they don't actually change the file itself. They're not manipulating or changing the raw file at all. So what we're going to do here is create a circular brush that's about the right size of her eye, with a little bit of soft edge on it, so you can adjust how soft the brush is. I like to leave a little softness, so once again it doesn't look fake. You don't see a transition around her eye. And we want that to be a smooth transition. So if you push M on the keyboard in Capture One, you can see your mask. So what we're going to do is just pop a little mask on both of her eyes. And obviously this one's going to be, we're going to have to erase, this circle is too large, so we're going to need to erase that. So what we'll do now is just grab an eraser, come back here and just clean this up a little bit. I try to be real careful not to be sloppy with these. I see a lot of photos that are posted where people do adjustments to the eyes like this, but then they're a little sloppy with the way they erase the mask, and sometimes you can see a really bright spot like on their eyelids, and it just sort of looks bizarre. So clean that up. So I think that's pretty good. And obviously I haven't changed anything to this layer mask yet, so right now it's just I'm deciding the area I want to affect once I do start editing this. So what we're going to do here is turn the mask back off so we can see what we're doing. I like to zoom out a little bit because if you don't really have context for what you're doing when you're real close. While it looks pretty, to be real close, you're not really getting a clear picture of the overall look. So what we're going to do here is I usually start with eyes. At least I like to start by recovering some of the shadows. So any shadows, obviously eyes are inset into your head a little bit, so they're going to create a lot of shadows in there. So I like to recover the shadows. And as you can see already, her eyes are really popping. Obviously this would be too far. I don't like to go, once again, go fake with it. But what we're going to do is just lift that up a little bit, maybe add a touch of brightness, just a little bit, and then also just a little bit of sharpener, because it really like tightens up a lot of those details. So most of the time your lens will focus on the eyelid, or you know, as you can see, this is perfectly in focus right here on the ridge of her eye socket. And her eyelashes are insanely sharp. The eye itself is not completely sharp. When you zoom out, you're not going to be able to tell that it's not, but it looks like the focus really was in here and not on the eyeball itself or the iris. So what you can do to help that a little bit is add some structure under the clarity section. We can add some structure to that and see it looks like it's sharpening it up quite a bit. This would obviously be too far, but we'll just bump that just a little bit, give that a little extra sharpness, clarity, maybe just a tiny bit of that too. All right, and I think we're gonna zoom out here and check this out. So I'll turn off the local adjustment, and you can see that's before we did anything, and this is after. So it really adds a lot to the photo, I think. All right, so as far as raw file editing, I think we're pretty close to done. A lot of times I'll go in, if someone has a lot of you know, zits and blemishes on their skin, I'll kind of come in here and adjust that. Capture One has an amazing tool for that. So let's pretend this is a freckle, but let's pretend like this was a zit or something we wanted to get rid of. There's a tool right here called Remove Spot. Basically, you can change the size of it depending on how big the blemish is. You don't want to make it overly sized because then you'll start being able to see the edit. But let's pretend that was a blemish. Look how easy this is. You just click it, gone. I don't want to remove that because I think the freckles look great, so I'm going to delete that. But just showing you how easy it is to kind of remove blemishes and things like that. And we're gonna, in Photoshop, I like to take care of some of the more hardcore editing in Photoshop, so we're gonna clean that up here. Like there's a couple little spots on her hands I don't want to remove and clean up. So, and I do, every time I see this photo, I love it, but I always wish that I had had to remove the hairband from her wrist. I don't know, it's not that bad, but it's just one of those things. I guess we always are our worst critics to ourselves, right? All right, so overall, I think I'm pretty happy with this. I add a little bit of sharpener to the file overall. Maybe recover a little bit of these shadows some more. Revisit the white balance one last time just to make sure we aren't too yellow. Really, I'm looking at, when I adjust the white balance, I'm always looking at skin tone, because that's the most important thing. You can adjust the background to look as pretty as you want, but if the skin tone looks weird or too purple or too pink or too blue and they look sort of dead, it's not going to be very nice looking. So I think I'm pretty happy with this. So we're going to jump on over to Photoshop. Capture One has a really nice option over here for your export. You have kind of these export recipes, and what you can do is export this as a full resolution PSD. So we're going to process that sucker. I'm going to tell it where to put it. For now, I'm just going to put it on my desktop. That'll just take a moment. This might be a little pink, but we can still pink. But once we start adding some of the additional editing, you'll see how that evens out. All right, we're going to go ahead and quit out of Capture One Pro and jump on over to Photoshop. This was my final PSD that I used, but this is our new exported one here. So we're going to open that on up. We're going to be using a technique. I'm going to put the link in the description below. I forgot her last name, but staying inspired by other people who are doing a great job at anything that you want to get better at is a great idea. One of the people that I really admire, a couple of the people, number one as far as gear and shooting style and just overall education, Jason Lanier I think is amazing. I watch all of his videos as soon as they come out. Another guy that sort of a student of Jason Lanier and has gone on to do some great stuff is Manny Oriz. I love his stuff. It's super cool. I love his editing style as well. And someone I recently learned about, her name is Irene something. I'm going to put her link in the description area, but her editing, both her photos and her editing are unbelievable. So this is something I picked up from her, this first method we're going to show here, and it's called gradient masking. So now that we're over here in Photoshop, what we're going to do is create an adjustment layer. So you can create an adjustment layer, and it's basically called a gradient map. And this is kind of interesting. What this does is basically takes all the shadow, the darkest parts of the photo, and it makes them this, whatever color is on the left. This is sort of reversed right now, actually. And then whatever color is on the right, it assigns to the highlights. And so you can see, you can turn it on and off. So this is really cool. So what we're going to do here, so color theory wise, I want to get rid of some of this yellow. It's way too yellow looking still to me. So if you look at one of those color wheels, if you just Google color wheel, you'll see what I'm talking about. The opposite of yellow is purple on the color wheel. So what I'm going to do is want to do the opposite of the yellow, which is purple. So I'm going to get my dark color over here, my light color over here. As you can see, it's now correctly assigned to shadows and highlights. So I'm going to grab this dark color. I'm going to give that a purple. There's really no right and wrong with this. It's just sort of like you can adjust this later, so it's not a huge deal. So as you can see there, it assigned all the shadows to purple and all the highlights to white. So that's good. And I would obviously never use it like this because this is too much unless you were going for that kind of duotone effect. What you want to do is drop the opacity of this way down. So maybe somewhere around here, and probably also add this to multiply so that it really affects the photo. It kind of blends in a little bit better. So as you can see, and when I'm doing this, basically what we're going to do is erase out. I don't want this purple to affect her face. I like the skin tone that we have going on here. It's very soft and it's very pretty, so I only want this to affect her hair. As you can see, when I turn this on and off, and I drop this down to, let's say 40% just to make it a round number, when I turn this off, you can see what it's doing to the photo. I like what it's doing to her hair. See how it's evening out her hair? It's making it a little more kind of blonde looking as opposed to yellowy. A little more sandy blonde, which is what Michelle's hair is. And also the sweater, it kind of adds a nice, you know, it makes the sweater chill out a little bit as far as being too bright yellow, and really adds some nice moody tones back here, which I like, but I don't want it to affect her face. So what we're gonna do here is, let me see if I can remember how to do this. We're gonna grab a black brush, and we're gonna get a larger, you can push the little brackets in Photoshop and make larger brushes or smaller brushes. I'm gonna erase out this mask, this adjustment layer. I'm gonna erase this out. It automatically adds a mask over here. I'm gonna erase it out so that I don't affect her skin. So, all right, so as you can see here, as I paint with this black brush, it's essentially anything that's black in this layer mask is not going to be allowed to come through. Anything that's white will be showing full speed, you know, full force. So as you can see, as I erase this with this brush, it's changing this here, and it's kind of blocking that adjustment layer from coming through. So what I want to do is just have a real soft brush here and sort of just go through and erase out the areas where her skin is, because I don't want that layer mask to affect her skin. So that's her. That sort of takes care of her face. I'm gonna get in here to her hands because it sort of turned her hands purple, and I don't like that. So, and you really don't have to be too super accurate with this. It's really just visually, you know. And if you were to mess up, so that's pretty good there. But if you were to mess up and get her shirt like that, you can just push X on the keyboard, switch this back to white, and draw white back into the layer mask, and there you go. So you're really not doing anything permanent to this. So there we go. As you can see, I'll turn this on and off. You can see how the layer mask has affected our photo. I think I caught a little bit of her hair in here, so I'm gonna see if I can remove that. There we go. I want to leave her hair. I do want the hair to be affected by the layer mask, but not her skin. I'm gonna brush that back in. And there we go. See, it kind of toned down those yellows quite a bit. Now that we have done that, I want to sort of do the same thing again, but, you know, this time I want to affect only the, I want to basically duplicate this mask and do it again. But this time I want to do a blue. There's some blue tones. I really like blue, adding a little bit of blue to the shadows of a photo. It kind of gives it this sort of film look that I really enjoy. Probably a little bit more muted blue. Okay. And I probably won't add quite as much of the blue. I'm going to fade that one back quite a bit. Maybe like a 10%. So you see how it's just barely adding some blue tones to this. Not really doing a ton. And so after that, I'm going to come on over here to my curves. Oh, I'm sorry, contrast. That's what I'm looking for. Where'd it go? I can do that with the levels here. I'm going to sort of adjust the levels here again just to make this pop a little bit, add a little bit of contrast back into this. There we go. And again, I'm not doing anything destructive to the file because I'm doing this on an adjustment layer. It really helps, it lets me kind of rein this in exactly the way I want it. We have a little bit of saturation going on here, so I'm going to add another adjustment layer for saturation and pull that back just a little bit. I don't want to go too crazy and make it black and white, but I want to kind of just tone back a little bit of that. There we go. All right, so color-wise, I think we're looking pretty good. What I'm going to do now is just go in here quickly and remove some of the actual any imperfections in the photo, anything that I find distracting. Again, I don't like getting too crazy in Photoshop, but we're going to do some quick little edits that are really going to help clean this file up a bit. You'll see what we're going to do here. And while we're at it, I'm going to adjust these levels again. It's feeling a little pink to me, but you know, that could be a result of us adding those purple masks. So there we go, that helps a little bit.
All right, so what we're going to do here is the new Photoshop has a thing called the patch tool that is unbelievable. You used to have to do every bit of this with the rubber stamp tool, which is great, but was very manual. You'd have to go in there and really do it, know what you were doing, and sometimes even then it wasn't great. So what we're going to do here is grab this patch tool. So the first thing I want to do is clean up. She has a couple little spots of dead skin here on her lips. First thing we're going to do is, we'll duplicate our layer just in case we want to go back to the original. And with this patch tool selected, you can basically circle any area on the photo. Watch this. All I'm going to do is circle that, and then you drag that to an area that looks similar to the area you want. So color-wise, that's pretty close to what I want. And check this out. When you let go, it analyzes all the pixels near it and makes the area that you circled look like the same texture as where you dragged it, but the lighting of what was near it. So as you can see, that did a pretty awesome job. You can't even tell. So we're going to keep doing that. Do that a couple more areas just to kind of even this out. And there's sort of a secondary process for brushing stuff like this that I'll do as well, you'll see. So you can see as we're going, this is going really quick, and you don't even have to get it perfect. Even if you just drag it here, watch, it'll colorize it to look the way it's supposed to. So we're going to have a secondary process that we're going to. That last one wasn't that great, but we can always do it again. That'll lighten that up. There we go. So as you can see, that looks much, much better. So here's our original, and then this is now. And you would never be able to tell that we did anything to that. All right, we're going to grab a couple other areas on her fingers. Looks like there's a couple of scars maybe or something. We're going to kind of just quickly clean those up. Usually I'm using a mouse for this, but usually I use a Wacom pen that is kind of nice. It makes you feel like you're doing art a little bit more than drawing with a bar of soap, as it feels with a mouse a little bit sometimes. And there we go. I think we got all of the areas that I would like to adjust. I don't see any areas on her face that I really want to adjust. The freckles are great. I want to keep those, obviously. We'll zoom back out. And there we go. For the lips and skins, this is something I also do sometimes, and I made an action for it. And actually, if you go back over to that the girl I mentioned's YouTube video, Irene, she has a technique for this, and that's what I'm using. And I'll show you how that works here. And you can go to her channel to check out those actions. But I have an action for highlighting and an action for shadows. So what we're going to do here is select our layer. I'm going to choose my highlighting action. And as you can see, what that basically does is it just bumps the highlights just a little bit. And what we're going to do here is grab a brush. And you see, as I paint with this, that might be a little too intense, but it's good for illustration purposes. As I brush with that, so watch this. See, it's lightening certain areas. And then the darkening one, we'll name this lighten so I can keep track of that. And then we're going to do another one with the darken, or the shadows. And that's going to basically darken any areas that I paint. And so I can darken anything I want. So we're going to go to I'll name that just to be neat and tidy. We'll go to the lighten one. Basically, I do this on photos sometimes. I just some really minor pops. I'm going to bring the opacity of this down to like 40-ish%. And I just want to pop a couple little highlights on her cheekbones just to make those stand out a little bit. So we're just going to give her cheekbones just a little bit of bump there. On this one even too. And again, subtlety is your friend. You know, really, and I'm learning this as well, but what you want to do is really on your photos, they should be a result of a bunch of tiny changes. You really don't want to do massive changes. A bunch of tiny changes both look more natural and they don't look as if you really went crazy on a photo. I think a lot of small changes are much better than big sweeping changes. Darken, so what I'm going to do on darken is just grab a lasso tool here. Her chin is pretty decently defined. I'd like to define it just a tiny bit more, so what I'm going to do is just kind of like roughly draw the shape of that shadow area. This doesn't have to be exact either. And
And I want to add a little bit of an edge there so you can see what'll happen here. I'm just going to add a little bit of darkening here, just so it makes her face pop even more and adds a little depth back there. So we're going to just darken that just a little bit. There we go. And as you can see, this is removing it and adding it back in. See how it just adds a little depth. It gives a little shadow underneath her chin. And I think that's about it. We're going to add a little bit of something on her lips. The texture of her lips is great. I want to kind of downplay it just a little bit though. So what we're going to do is add a new layer. And this is something I do to brush skin tones as well. You can grab a color that's similar. Say pick a color that's close to what you wouldn't mind them being in general. So somewhere on there is pretty good. So what we're going to do is grab a brush, and we're going to set this layer to the brush level to like 8. We don't want this to be very noticeable. Then we're going to come into the brush with this brush, and we're going to just sort of brush in that lip color. And what that's going to do is it's going to place some of the wrinkles in her lips a little bit. And you won't really, it doesn't look as if I'm doing anything yet, but you'll see here in a second. Just something to keep in mind, light colors in a photo will pop and come towards you. Dark colors will push back into the background. So also I defaulted to a little bit lighter color so her lip will look a little more full and pop. It's already pretty decently full, but you'll see what that does here in a second. So I went over that probably 10 times with that, and as you can see what it did here. See how it sort of smoothed out some of those wrinkles a little bit? And when you back up, you can sort of see. And then we might have gone a little too far, so what I'll just do is drop that opacity just a little bit. And again, subtle changes. This is not a huge change, but as you can see, it's just a little bit of a pop to kind of smooth some of that out. And there we go. I think I'm pretty happy with that. That's pretty close to the final edit I did before. And luckily I was able to recreate that. I was a little afraid I was going to get into this video and not be able to recreate what I did the first time. But besides some general levels, we might kind of, I always come back to photos that I've edited and be like, oh man, I should have done this, I should have done this. But in general, this is looking pretty good. It's still a little dark in the shadow areas, but overall it's looking pretty nice. We can revisit this gradient mask again. See if we want to increase that or decrease it. I don't think I want to go quite that far, but it's accomplishing what it's supposed to accomplish at this point. And that's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. Share this video with any friends that you might know that are into photography or editing. And until next time, we'll see you soon.